gosh, I just put something I did not mean to put in the chat. Ignore that. Let's try this one instead.
You should care about dams, though. It's a very important issue. We had a great lunch and learn on that. Yeah.
But you'll have a chance to read that copy later when it shows up in the place that I'm actually drafting it for right now. So sorry about that. And welcome. It is so wonderful to have such a good crowd with us today for today's program, Building a Joyful, Welcoming, Powerful Climate Movement That Cannot Be Ignored. 40 years of headlines and data and demonstrations and policies have led to some great progress on climate action, but there's an important question that remains. How can we inspire an even more diverse and flourishing movement for the future? Community arts projects thrive on challenging, fun, and meaningful engagement, the kind that fosters equity and creates common ground. And these projects are playing an increasingly powerful role in building the relationships and the movement we need. Marty Pottenger is with us today to share about the role of community arts projects in inspiring a flourishing movement for the future. Marty is an award-winning theater artist and the executive and artistic director of Art at Work, which is a Maine-based national arts initiative that partners with communities, organizations, and municipal governments to put creativity to work addressing non-arts-based challenges. Art at Work inspires, invents, and supports creative projects and collaborations that deepen connections, especially across lines of difference, and increase understanding, equity, and joy. We are so excited for today's presentation, and boy, does it feel like we all need it right now. My name is Kathleen Neal. I am the Director of Policy and Partnerships here at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations represent more than 13,000 members and supporters dedicated to protecting Maine's environment and our democracy. MCA does that through education, collaboration, and advocacy, and MCV by influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. A few technical notes for today. We will hear from Marty first, and then tackle your questions in the Q&A session at the end. You don't have to wait, though. You can send questions to me through the chat whenever they occur to you, and I will keep track of those and ask Marty those at the end. We ask that you not message Marty during the presentation so she can stay focused on on what she wants to say. Please message Will Sedlak if you have any technical difficulties. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website later this afternoon, where you can also find recordings of all of our previous programs. Thank you all again for joining us. And Marty, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen, and Will, and the whole staff of MCV for the work you do and also for making this possible. I've had a blast putting this together. It is a bit of a 12-week college high school course in 33 minutes, but I want to dive right in. This is a bit of a tour of amazing art that's being made, but also an exploration for people who are identify as activists who want to get more involved about ways that community arts can actually move things forward in important ways. So here we are. Slide is up, right, Will?
It sure is, Marty. This is the Olaf one. Yes.
Great. This is a piece by Olaf Eliasson. He's an artist. He went to Greenland and gathered already floating ice chunks, much bigger than you see them here, and brought them to Paris, COP21, and gathered them in a circle in a square. And one of the things I'd like to do today is invite you all to make a practice of engaging your imagination as a way of creating space for healing, appreciation, grief, reverence, and for connecting to the astonishing beauty of Mother Earth. So let's pause for a moment here together Imagine yourself near one of these pieces of ice. Feel the cold. Close your eyes and imagine that you are in Paris right next to an ice chunk. Place your hand on the ice and feel the cold. Consider its journey. Now, before we return here, take a breath, hold it. And then, even for a moment, notice that the oxygen molecules in your lungs were likely to be frozen for the last 10,000 years. We're in the most significant battle that human beings have ever faced. Staying engaged and connected to each other rather than numb is essential. Art can do that. Next slide. This is a print by Denilson Baniwa. He's an indigenous Brazilian artist. Seeing this image when I saw it the first time of an indigenous dancer carved out of the Amazon jungle, it connected me to the reality of deforestation more than anything I've read over many years. Even more powerful in my knowing that dance has been a meaningful and powerful expression, action, and medicine for indigenous people here in Maine and around the earth. Next slide. I had to include slides. Choosing these slides was like deciding, sharing who your favorite child is. It was very difficult. And then having a relationship with so many artists in Maine made it all the more exciting. But this, I thought, really showed a different angle. It's called a cautionary benchmark. Andrew Kong says the bench intends to act as a cautionary tale, the same way Greek tragedies did in the form of performance, to shape a communal behavior or attitude. It's in London, and it certainly does that. This is Maya Lin. Maya Lin's Ghost Forest. It was installed in Madison Park last year in New York City and Manhattan. It's 40 white cedar trees that had already been killed from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and they dug them 8 feet in the ground. They're about 40 feet high. And again, I'd like to invite you to imagine that you are there at the edge or in the center, standing. Center yourself, feel your feet on the ground, breathe. Take it in as both a tribute and an acknowledgement. It reminds me of the Vietnam War Memorial in DC, which Maya Lin also designed. Next slide. This is Extinction Rebellion's Red Brigade, and they're frighteningly fabulous, I would say. And they don't only go to demonstrations and actions, but they also go to communities, beaches, and public gatherings, which I got to watch some video online, and it's the power of them showing up and just silently being present. It's very intense. I said it gave me chills, what I call necessary chills. Next slide. Had to do it. Agnes Dens. This is a 2 acres of wheat that she planted in 1982. She calls it Wheatfield, a confrontation. It's you can see where it is, Battery Park City, before Battery Park City was built. And it's 2 acres, and it was harvested August 16th. That was over 1,000 pounds of healthy golden wheat. She remarks that planting that on a land worth $4.5 billion created a powerful paradox. Wheatfield was a symbol, a universal concept. It represented food, energy, commerce, world trade, economics, and it also referred to mismanagement. I'm just pawing through my papers. I hope I'm not making too much noise. I just wanted to tell you, and it also calls attention to our misplaced priorities. The harvested grain traveled to 28 cities around the world in an exhibition called the International Art Show for the end of world hunger. And the seeds were carried away by people who planted them in many parts of the globe. And there's a reason, obviously, for all the slides I've chosen. And for this one, I thought it really shows the jarring contrast. It shows the possibilities made real. And it also by the fact that it traveled to all those exhibits shows the longevity that this work can have, that it isn't just that day, that moment necessarily, or that season. It actually can go on for years and years and have a very powerful impact. So next slide. Okay, another favorite. And the last one of our kind of international tour. This is one of my favorites, and I couldn't resist sharing it with you. Come with me to the edge of Plymouth, England, the coast, where the ocean meets the land. And for a year, 2 years ago, this sign was out in the water, "No New Worlds." Plymouth was where the Mayflower launched 402 now years ago, but this was to commemorate the 400th anniversary. And I guess this is for me another, it took my mind in a completely unexplored terrain in a way that reading history did not, to just say no new worlds, and obviously has resonance with the situation we're in now with climate destruction. Thank you. Next slide, please. Here we are, everybody. I think creativity is so important. It belongs in the periodic table of elements. This is from my TED Talk in 2014 here in Maine. It's on YouTube. It's a treat and goes into detail about other projects. But CR for creativity. It's each of us are born with a limitless abundance of creativity. And any one of us who's gotten to spend time with young people or remember being young, know that's not something we need to learn. It's part of our operating system. And while we use it in different ways throughout our lives, for most of us, we rarely put it to work with the same focus and abandon as a 2-year-old with a box of crayons or a cape and a feathered cap. So, next slide. Now we're moving on. I'd like to share a few of the many Maine artists making climate-related work in an array of forms. Some of their work will live in books, on stage, in galleries, installations, demonstrations, public locations, on radio, online, broadcast, or screen. Other art, performances, drumming, banners, dances, songs were created in response to an event, a march, a parade, a campaign, a crisis, or a protest. You can see I like lists. And then after that, we'll take a look at a type of art that engages communities in the making. And in doing that, it has the potential to transform cultures, relationships, and narratives. Potawatomi author and botanist Robin Kimmerer, in her book Braiding Sweetgrass, which is such a deep change agent for the cultures, any of the cultures I was brought up in. She shares in that book that the Potawatomi language, birds, pecans, rocks, bears, and streams are all a part of the living world. Next slide. Here's a friend and Art at Work board member Lee Chisholm's Cod and Funeral Carriage. It's a wonderful example of the ways art can bring meaning, emotion, and inspiration to a demonstration. Like nothing else, the way a marching band, costumes, or whistle brigades can raise spirits and deepen connections. Next slide. Sierra Henrys is a wonderful Maine Nipmuc birch bark artist, and she's going to be working with us on a project I'll mention later called Planet E Mini Golf. But she has a great website and lots of work you can see there. Next slide. Natasha Mayers. She started ARRT, Artist Rapid Response Team. Some of you may already know it, or maybe most of you do it. Years ago, and every 4th of July parade in Wheatfield, Maine, she gets a bunch of people together and they work very hard leading up to it, making really amazing collaborations and visual representations of some important issue that we're dealing with as a nation and possibly locally. She's also co-founder of Maine Union of Visual Artists, and I would strongly encourage any of you to sign up for their newsletter. It's filled with amazing art by Maine artists and also really good articles. Here's Daniel Minter. He's a co-founder of Indigo Arts Alliance, and he's a long-time treasured collaborator of Art at Work. We've been working together on projects for the last 15 years. 15 years. This piece is in Milwaukee. It's called Root Work, and I wanted to read a quote of his. Root work: to make repair well below the surface, to go deeper, to seek the source of an issue, to look beyond the symptoms and identify the cause. Next slide. If you don't know either of these groups, you're in for a treat. Polliver Strings and Halcyon String Quartet. I want to get to I did some new notes and I want to get to them to read those instead. Almost there. Two superb collectives with a primary focus on weaving superb music and social justice. I was blessed to be a part of Polliver Strings' Welcome Home. On their website, you'll see a fantastic 14-minute video where they toured 7 cities, Maine cities and towns in 2019, featuring the music and stories of 3 individuals, a part of the performance from Burundi, from Iraq, and a Franco heritage Mainer. And then you can go to Halcyon String Quartet's website. This is coming up July 24th. This is real time. It's not from another year. And they have an entire series of partnering with climate scientists, climate groups, climate efforts around Maine the whole summer. And it's a wonderful list. So next slide, please. Here's Titi de Baccarat. He's born in Gabon. He came here from the Republic of Congo. And his paintings tell the story of the continent. This is his description. He channeled his experiences of democracy, promoting a culture of peace and solidarity between communities and denouncing armed conflicts and wars that have claimed the lives of millions of people in Africa. And for me, one of the gifts of our growing immigrant and refugee communities here is we have an abundance of opportunities to learn about climate connections, around the world and in Africa and here, climate solutions, and a lot of knowledge that's brought to us in their communities about building community. Next slide. This work is called Tread, and it's by Andy Rosen, the remarkable artist whose installation many of you may already know, that pack of dogs that was down by Ocean Gateway Pier in Portland. And this is this one's on Tread is on Casco Bay. I think it doesn't there anymore. But he describes these deers as weather vanes and says, in the space between imagination and reality is an attempt to better understand the human role in the natural world. This particular tale tells the effects of rising seas and habit encroachment. Okay, I tried to bring you all even a glimpse of the layers of different kinds of art, and that would be even longer than this is going to be. So here's Megan Grumley. She's the editor for the poetry that the Press Herald series, the Press Herald does. Here's her Persephone in the late Anthropocene, and she took an ancient myth story and made it into an opera and wrote the libretto, and it was unbelievable. I got to see it at Space Gallery, and it's an ancient myth, and she brings it into the age of climate change as the goddess comes and goes erratically from our warming world. And that's now a book on the left. You can see it's the libretto, not the music. Next slide. Okay, people, what does inclusivity look like? I had to put it in. I added it this morning. This is choreographer Chris Sutton's annual Halloween zombie event in Monument Square. I'm not a fan of zombies, but I am a fan of inviting the people who are fans of zombies to come together and have an annual event and meet each other and have fun and design their looks and practice the hell out of the choreography. They do a great job. So my list for you all of what does inclusivity look like is age, race, national origin, class, economic resource, gender, education, ability, disability, background, rural, urban, suburban, and zombie. Next slide. This is a treasured friend and also Art at Work board member, Miku Paul. She's Maliseet, belongs to the Kings Clear Maliseet Nation. She's a poet, a story keeper, a visual artist, a permaculturist, and a climate activist. And she's living here in Portland. And I wanted to read a poem of hers, just the first stanza. The poem is for an event called Genocide in Maine, Shining the Light of Truth. And the poem is called, the first stanza is called Song for Mashigon. The first name, the name before it was anything else, this place that I live. Mashigon, your truest name, before the French and English came to raid the land of her tallest trees and pull the fish from her blue knee. The fur they took in trades for pots and drink, and rusty blades could not sate their endless hunger or abate their supernatural greed. Oh, Mashigon, your name is dust. You have begun to bleed. I had a lot of choices about poems to share with you all today, and some were joyful, some were reverent, some were inspiring. I chose this one because it makes it clear that we need ways to acknowledge and integrate the levels of grief and loss and sorrow in the narrative of Maine's history in order to actually build the sturdy, robust, and reality-based climate movement that will actually see us through to success. Next slide. Jenny Hahn, another friend, she runs Open Waters. Again, there's a website, lots to explore. She's a civic performance artist working at the intersections of environmental stewardship, ecological arts practice, and public dialogue in her home state in Maine. This is from two different things. Her projects include Farm and Fables, an original play in collaboration with Maine farmers. It includes a piece called Choir Speak about the Maine woods for 50 interviews in 5 Maine towns. And she co-designed a partnership to incorporate performance techniques into policy development practices with Stephanie Gilbert, who then worked for the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. So she's the most similar to me in my work in that she does figure out how to intersect and engage municipalities, local initiatives, policy movements, that kind of thing. So I have a special spot in my heart for her, and well worth the exploring. Next slide. Okay, now I'd like us to explore a growing arts practice that has yet to settle on a name. Community art, arts-based civic engagement. I just won an award, leadership in community theater and civic-based engagement or something, and you're just like, oh my God. Okay, thank you. And I do mean that. But anyway, creative placemaking, social practice. And with more time, I'd share a lot more, but here's a few of these artists that I really wanted to let you know about. We've got Bennett Konesny. He's a work songing specialist. He's a really great guy, and he says he's a national treasure for sure. He says, let's get the culture back into agriculture, the songs, the music, the dance, the stories, the art that was such a big part of farming for thousands of years. And whether he's out on a schooner out on Belfast, which apparently you can buy a ticket and go, whether he's stacking a neighbor's wood or picking garlic from his massive garlic farm, the work songing builds community, raises spirit, and gets the work done. Next slide. Anna Dibble. She's a force to be reckoned with in the best meaning of the phrase. She's a painter and installation artist, and she founded Gulf of Maine Eco Arts. This piece, some of you hopefully have seen it. It's at Bigelow Labs up in Booth Bay. You can go see it during the day. Check their website called Majestic Fragility. Andy Rosen did this amazing whale. Lee Chisholm, Anna did a plankton and things that I can't remember the name right now, seabirds, but it's all hanging. It's quite powerful. It's worth just kind of being with and breathing with. She I quote her, making art, and out of the activity of making art, awakening a sense of connection to the teeming life in the Gulf of Maine, to the science and the scientists who are busy seeking ways to sustain life, to the students, teachers, climate activists, and fellow artists who are collectively inviting us to take up our identity as stewards. This is what this project is all about. And before moving on, I just want to say she's got a huge project in her team at Maine Maritime Museum called Sea Change coming up in 2023. And now it's my delight to introduce you to Heather Flora Crone. This is Monet Gardens, which is in Portland, and she's hosting a series of artist-led events held at a medicinal flower garden. And through an open call process, she's invited BIPOC people to submit their stories of medicinal plants from their culture or homeland. Each flower and plant will be included in the garden at Presente Farm, in addition to other sacred plants. And they're going to host several events as well. This tote bag she made to celebrate Presente and celebrate the event. And it just shows like some of what you can do. It's totally like, where does your mind go? Where does your imagination take you? What's the issue you want to help enliven? Next slide. Pamela Moulton. This happens to be these three wonderful creatures are trees in her project at Basin Park right now, beneath the forest, beneath the sea. A Tempo Arts project. Thank you, Tempo Arts. And I checked with her because she's working with me on that Planet or E project, and 5,620 people helped create these. This is made out of ghost gear, abandoned fishing gear. She cleaned, she dyed, she built the structures. They had a crane move this all in, and now she's organized several community events in Payson Park all throughout the summer to go with them. Thank you, Pamela. Next slide. Okay, everybody, take a deep breath. This is going, I think it's going okay. We're all still here. This is worth a deep breath. This is the Beehive Collective. They were based for years up in Machias, Maine. They aren't anymore, but they're still here in Maine. Kevin Greer is she's at the center in a very real way. And they make these incredible, I'm showing you two slides just to show you the level of artistry in their work. This is a poster for some of our Wabanaki brothers and sisters went on an Eastern Direction water walkers from Bad Little Falls in Machias all the way to Bad River in Wisconsin. And this was the poster that they made. And then this is the scale of the work they do. This is called The True Cost of Coal. And they literally spent years interviewing people in coal country, collecting all their stories, and then putting that into this visual mural, huge. And she likened it, we met the other week, she likened it to the kind of murals that get made in churches and cathedrals and temples throughout the country, right? Throughout, I mean, the world and throughout history, that there's stories being told and tapestries. And I love that. That was very helpful. And that's what this bringing in. Then they take it around the communities, and people have like really engaged conferences, conversations, discussions among themselves, using that as their anchor point. Next slide. Blessing of the Creatures, everybody. It's an ancient Passamaquoddy prayer song. It's sung and shared by Vera Francis. It's a listening video. I titled it a listening video because it's not that visual. This is one of the images. And it's very, if you want to re-anchor, it's a good place to re-anchor. It's 4.5 minutes long. And it's seen by thousands of people thanks to Upstandard Project, who did that documentary, Dawnland, about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They play this video as people are gathering. And this is going to start off Maine Outdoor Film Festival on July 28th at 7 p.m. at the Gulf of Maine Resort. They're going to start with this listening video. Okay, here we are. So now we're going to those projects I told you about, community projects that actually engage people in the art making. and have a chance to tackle a particular challenge, have very specific goals, identify opportunities, or reframe a narrative, right? And that isn't necessarily the case for some of the work we've gotten to see, but that's my relationship to making work, right? And while Art at Work has helped create this field, starting in 1987, this type of work is now funded nationally. And I wanted to take a moment to share this with all of you. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going to support this kind of work. It's taught at universities all around the country. It's being integrated into local and rural and urban governments. New York City has a major gazillion-dollar project bringing like 150 or 100 artists in to work for 3 years and paying them a living wage and benefits to figure out how to bring creativity into solutions that the city's battling. Boston, same thing. Minneapolis, LA, and yesterday I got to meet online through this organization, NEA, with project leaders from West Virginia, Tennessee, New Mexico, and North Dakota. So this is big. This is kind of where I want to make sure you all feel like you've got an anchor when we leave. So we're going to look at some Art at Work projects because that's kind of the whole point of my projects at Art at Work. This is about homelessness and gentrification. It's called Listening Wall. It's ended up being a million more things, and on our website you can learn a lot more, but it also was an 8-foot by 30-foot folding wall with a chalk surface in Monument Square on May 1st on First Friday, and thousands of people got to engage with it. Hundreds of people. It had cubbies, if you look in the bottom picture, where graduate students are partners with the graduate department at USM and social work. Graduate students offered 10-minute listening, so not a conversation, listening with anyone who wanted to about their relationship to homelessness and gentrification. And we had a pop-up stage. You can see on the lower left, that young woman is doing a performance. Those are some prompts behind her to help inspire people to do something. And then top right is Jim, who's one of the founders of Homeless Voices for Justice, who came by and also did a pop-up exchange. And then lots of people wrote. So I will say that listening is probably the most essential ingredient. And it doesn't necessarily mean just listening, but it's like, how is listening involved in whatever campaign you're doing or project, or how you're thinking about it? And it's not a conversation I'm talking about, and not a discussion. It really is listening to someone kind of follow their minds. And it's a superpower, and it's essential ingredient, along with relationships and building the climate movement. I think will have a lot more possibility of success. So next slide. Quick. Portland school board hearing years ago. They were going to cut the budget of the Portland adult education. I had the honor of getting to brainstorm with Portland adult education about that meeting, and we came up with 4-inch buttons that just said thank you, that all the people testifying and supporters in the group, and instead of getting less, they got more. And it wasn't just because of the buttons, but I wanted to offer that here to MCV and any of you who are involved in environment organizations to say it's sometimes very simple and not that expensive, and you can totally switch a situation around. Here's Homeland Security. It's on YouTube. It kind of brought me to Maine. My ancestors lived here for the whole of 1800s and fought in the Civil War in Maine regiments and all that. But I didn't get here till 2005. And this, you could see Portland's former mayor Jill Doosan, lots of people in this, and inviting and engaging elected officials and agency department personnel and fire chiefs and police officers in performances. It is like rocket fuel in a very sweet way. I guess photosynthesis is more powerful than rocket fuel, so let's use that one, okay? And so inclusion needs to be an essential element in everything we do. And decades of this work, my own work, doing this kind of work, has made it clear to me that human beings, like ecology, thrive on diversity. I may have to just say little bits. This is there was a police fatal shooting in 2010. The police chief asked if I would do a performance with the officers. I said it wasn't about a PR, that there were real issues in any police department that needed to be handled, that I needed to work with those people. We came to some sort of a resolution and we moved forward. I separately, without permission, because art at work really is about transformation and social justice issues. I was able to commission independently with Maine Inside Out to, they did a separate play with 9 African-born high school students who you see some of whom here. And so there were 2 performances that traveled around Portland's 3 high schools and the public library. I know some of you on this call got to see it, and it was life-changing. And at the debriefing, every single participant 3 weeks after the last performance said it changed their life. Next slide. Did a play, wrote and co-directed, and was in a play called #Philly Saves Earth back in 2016. Quick snapshot, the play had lots of parts, but this is seen is a grandfather and his granddaughter, and it's about 50 to 100 years from now, and in the play, Philly's underwater. And he's taken a rowboat and rowed back to where his mother's, he thinks he grew up where his mother's house was in that neighborhood, and they're above it in a rowboat, and he's sharing how much his mother loved and tended her roses. And his granddaughter is asking, why didn't she love and tend the climate back then? Why just her roses? And for me, I'm sharing this with you to kind of give you an example of what it is to figure out safe, meaningful ways for us to feel the enormity of what we're facing and to stay together. There's no connection like one that happens in theater, and stay together at the same time. Okay, I think it may be, I may have to wrap this up quickly. Isn't that a nice picture? You would love to know more about that. And this is on the top left is Tony's Donuts. He took it over once a week to have a discussion, gather stories about Libbytown, which had been really ripped up by 295 years ago. And I just want to encourage that we can do that about climate issues or local issues as well, right? Kind of share a space that's already a space. Glacier Stories, we built across the street from me a 14-foot high, 60-foot wide glacier out of shrink wrap, used boat shrink wrap. And this is Jen Hutchins and her family and her husband, Peter Weed. They all came. And I wanted to make the point of how you can call an event and invite people, and then they get to be creative in a way that they wouldn't have if they hadn't been invited, right? This is 2 big projects. We haven't gotten the funding or the team yet, but this is Maine, USA. It's the history of Maine from the Ice Age till now. It's got a big tent idea, seasonal, full-size right whale, and music and dance. And here's that project I mentioned, reference Planet E Mini Golf, think global, golf local. We're partners with the city of South Portland. Bug Light is a possible location. And the idea is that each, we would really be crossing to try to bring together and cross some of the partisan divides. And these are some of the artists that have agreed to be in it, and some I just love their work and wanted to show it to you. And maybe they'll be in it, maybe they won't, but the artists would get to design each hole. And community resiliency and climate resiliency requires social resiliency. This is kind of a final point, right? And how do we create common ground with opportunities that are attractive across partisan lines? Ideas that are sticky enough to get people offline and in person, and that include friends and families in diverse communities where interaction and engagement is key. So there's our welcoming, joyful, inclusive, educational, fun, and meaningful. Thanks for your lovely time, for your lovely attention, and now for our Q&A and considerations. Thank you, Will, for doing such a sweet job flying through that.
Marty, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. A couple of things that jumped out at me as you were talking. Human beings, like ecological systems, thrive on diversity. I wrote that down when it came out of your mouth, because how beautiful is that?
Yeah.
And climate resiliency requires social resiliency. Just those, I think it's so important to sit with those ideas and to really hear them and understand them. And thank you. Thank you for the illustrated tour of the world too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. We have a couple of questions here, but I just want to let everybody know in the follow-up email that goes out later this afternoon, we will include a link to Art at Work, so you can poke around and learn more about the project, sign up for newsletters, and really consider supporting this incredible work. There's also a link in that follow-up email to Marty's TED Talk, which is amazing. You have a sense of just how amazing it is. Go find out for sure. And a couple of you have asked about making sure we get a list of all the artists covered in this.
Oh, good. Okay.
Conversation. Yeah. And it's so funny because Marty and I were going back and forth about this a little bit this morning. And I said, oh gosh, the more links we include, the fewer links people actually end up clicking on. But you know what? I am hearing from you all that you want to be able to do that and learn more. So Marty, ignore the last email I sent you. Let's give everybody all the information.
Yeah, I agree. It's a long list. I thought the same thing you did. That's why I asked you, but okay.
Yeah, it is. And how incredible is that there are so many people around the world turning to art and to community art projects to process what we're all going through and to think about mobilizing. And so one of the first questions I have for you, Marty, is how can we think about, it sounds like you shared some examples of projects that, to my mind, seem like they sprung up on their own, right? There was an individual artist who said, I'm gonna follow this path.
Right.
This is what I'm called to do right now. And then some that were, whether it's someone like you or in some other formal way, responding to an invitation to say, what would it look like to use your art to communicate this idea? Am I oversimplifying that, or is that
no? I tried to really figure out ways to say it where it all has the merit it merits.
Yeah. And what do you see as the compare and contrast? How do those things happen, or how do you from your organizational position look out on the world and keep track of all of those things that are happening?
I definitely don't keep track. I think like anything, you're somewhere and you see somebody you like, and now you have a friend. And so you see a piece in a magazine, you see a piece by accident or on purpose, and I think clearly art is the one thing that we have for thousands of years. We treasure the Lascaux caves and the caves in the Pyrenees, the bison on the wall and the deer, and we recognize the beauty and the meaning and power of that. So that's the material you're working with. You're working with something that's so powerful that we've kept track of, books and plays and music for thousands of years, and it's had that meaning. In some cultures, certainly indigenous cultures, has never lost track of it in some cases, right? And so I think it's essential to our survival. I think it's essential for us. I said to a friend a couple months ago, I need to build my capacity. I don't have the capacity to really take in what's happening in the way that I'd like to, and I feel like I need to, and want to. And so I feel like art is a real place where you can, both by making it and by seeing it and by engaging in it with friends and other people, I think that's really a place where you can actually reclaim the real depths of human experience in ourselves. Again, to think of young people, we're very profound, deep creatures, and most of our time we don't get to live there. So I think art has that, and it also. I came up with 5 quick things that well, they weren't quick, but 5 reliable outcomes of when people make art, because I've worked with thousands of people. And one was you access a flexible intelligence that often lies on fallow or not used. One was you connect to, you can hold contradictions. It allows people to hold contradictions, especially their own. Very helpful nowadays, right? Another one is you access an what I called an actual hope or rational hope, rather than I grew up in a white Protestant culture, and there's kind of like a cheery, unanchored hopefulness that I'm familiar with from my culture, and not that, the thing kind of hope we were born with that actually is sustaining. And then one was that you have to take the risks. Making art is very scary, and that's a good thing, but it's not something, comfort is not helping us, right? Comfort is a major drawback to what we need to do. And it's understandable, and it's nobody's fault, but we don't have room for that. And so there's risks when you make art. It's very scary, and it kind of builds your courage, the kind of courage we're going to need to take the kind of risks that I think are going to see us to make the kinds of advances we've hardly begun, right, Kathleen? I mean, we are nowhere near where we know we need to be. And the 5th one I'm forgetting right now, so we'll just leave it up. Y'all can fill it in.
I love that. I love that. And what an incredible list. At every next point on that list, I was like, oh yes, this is it. Oh my goodness. It all makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. So I would love to have that list and be able to share it as well, because
I think it's in one of the slides in the TED Talk, I think.
Perfect. So I have this very perhaps naive hope that all of these incredible artists are connecting with each other. Is that happening? Is there a space? You mentioned a couple of different cooperatives, but is there a place that folks who are doing this climate art or climate inspired art right now connecting with each other?
They are in different ways around the world. Certainly there's collectives, there's groups online, theater artists for climate action, all that kind of thing. You had mentioned that we had a chance to say a little bit about our organizations near the end. And I will say that Art at Work will be inviting artists and activists to join together to have a kind of series of conversations and talks here in Maine, a Maine-based group, and see how we can help each other, see how we can inspire each other, and see what we'd like to do together. So that's happening. That's one thing I'm excited about, and kind of came out of getting to do this. And then, I don't know what to call it, a roster or something, but to have a directory or something where people can actually go to Art at Work and learn about some of the works that are happening, and people can put their own work in and be listed. So it could be a fun way just to spend some time, or a place to do research for an idea you have.
I love that. And I also heard you say that you need more capacity. So if anybody is on this call right now and saying, gosh, I would love to do that project, you will soon know how to find
yes
it.
Yes, if you see how playing mini golf and learning something different, the way you play the each hole will strengthen your skill set for climate work. So one hole you blindfold and your teammates glide you through the hole, and that you cooperation and collaboration. And one hole you don't use your putter, you sit down on a tree stump and you share a 1-minute story with your co-players about a tree that's made a difference to you and why. So that's about vulnerability and sharing. So you get points. Some people care a lot about points, so that's going to be very important in Planet E mini golf.
That's right. We'll all be able to find our own hook.
Right.
So other than people raising their hands and saying, this sounds amazing, I want in, and I'm getting messages in the chat right now that are saying exactly that. So I'm writing down names, Marty, don't worry. But how is this incredible work funded?
I've had remarkable success for someone who wasn't trained in anything. Someone who's on the call, Barbara Schiffer Bacon, is from a group called Animating Democracy Initiative, and we've been colleagues since the late '90s. And she's, some colleagues that organization has not only offered financial support, they've offered friendship and moral support. Right? It's quite a journey, and their website is incredible. If you want to learn more, NEA's Our Town case making site. NEA Our Town is just great to look, but they have a site that I always have a hard time finding, but it's case making. And they just have scores, including Meeting Place, which I didn't get to share with you because I was zipping through, but just amazing projects from all over the country for all different sorts of reasons. And the good news is for somebody like me, they've added systems change as an absolute integral part of every funded application. Systems change. So it isn't just, there's nothing wrong with a mural. My goodness, we need murals, right? But then there's murals that actually have the kinds of things I mentioned. They have a goal, they have a purpose, they have an intention. There's some outcome that they're pointed at. And that's now a part of NEA's Art Time program. And then major funders, Nathan Cummings paid Art at Work $75,000 a year for 8 years. So I could work in the city manager's office of Portland, Maine, and pay for projects and a salary for myself out of that money. That was huge and really helped seed the national initiative. I did a lot of traveling. I got to work 8 days in a week. I had fun. It was good. So that's it. And Sewell, locally, Sewell supported a couple projects big time. Maine Arts Commission, the Humanities, Maine Community Councils. They've all had a good part to play. Sam Cohen Foundation. Yeah.
That's terrific.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. Very helpful. Very helpful. And it sounds like there are galleries and communities that are really looking to host these activities too.
Yeah.
What was it like to be in the city manager's office? That is not a place that you always expect to have an arts program.
No, I'd done a major project, like a 6-year project with the Department of Environmental Protection and the Sandhogs Union in New York City. So I had kind of had a little sense of municipal activities, but no, it was very different, and I wasn't used to New England culture either. So made good friends, felt like the oddball of all, and luckily knew and was able to and was welcome to build really genuine relationships with the public works workers. We did a whole project on racial discrimination with the police officers, did those 2 poetry calendars some of you know about, which was to address their historic low morale. The ideas seem wacky, but the things that I'm offering, improve your historic low morale, well, what are you going to say? No, no, we want historic low morale. And we want more racial discrimination lawsuits. Don't bother us. So, there was a real kind of agreement on that. And then we just figured out what kind of art, that Daniel Minter worked on the racial discrimination one, and we did carvings of their identities. The idea was through storytelling and printmaking, like kind of potato carving, like when you're a kid, right? But we used linoleum blocks, was to strengthen their ethnic identity and weaken their sense of whiteness as an identity, that they all had ethnic identities that were really legitimate and rich and interesting. And so that was that project, and it was just total blast.
Do you find yourself working with schools or with youth organizations much? It seems like kids are primed for this kind of thinking and working.
Some of the artists I just shared with you all, that's like totally Pamela Moulton, major big time, thousands and thousands of schools, hundreds of schools, thousands of students and teachers and faculty. Gretchen Berg, same, lots of those artists. That hasn't been my way because I really, really felt like local governments were going to have issues of the scale and nature of which they'd never seen and that they were not going to have. the support of federal and state governments necessarily, and so that really was where my passion was. So that's where it's been. And
Fair
union.
enough. You don't have to do every
Not
part of
every single
this.
thing. No. Luckily, there's these amazing people who are good at that other stuff.
It is really just so I can't even capture the gratitude and the joy that I am seeing in the chat, and I'm going to copy this and share it with you,
Thank you,
Marty.
Kathleen. Thank you.
But you know, the title of today's program about a joyful, welcoming, and powerful climate movement, you have really put images and words to that in a way that that I'll be honest, it is incredible and so encouraging, and really, really looking forward to finding out more and to tracking the work that you do, Marty, and that all of you. I know there are lots of artists on the call today, and thank all of you for the work that you do. As I said, you will get an email later this afternoon that will include a link to the recording of this program, as well as links to a whole bunch of other interesting places. So give us a second to get that all organized, and it'll be in your inboxes before the end of the day. Thank you all for joining us today. Next week's program is going to be a little different. We're going to talk about community solar. I heard somebody say recently that I am getting now as many offers to join community solar as I do get calls about my car's extended warranty. Which I thought was a pretty perfect encapsulation of where we are. So we are going to have Maine's public advocate, Bill Harwood, with us to sort through what's the deal? What questions should we be asking? How do we know which flyers to follow up on and which to put them directly in the recycling? So you'll get a link. This afternoon's email will also have a registration link for that. And I hope to see you then. Have a wonderful, creative, and joyful weekend. Thank you all. Thanks, Marty, especially.
Absolutely. Thanks to all of you. Look forward to hearing and staying in touch.